What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the channel. As always, I'm your co-host Donovan Quick, and before we get started, you see this little helmet up here in the corner. Make sure you go grab yourselves one or a custom one over at the Green Gridiron. The link is in our description. Go check them out. They have a lot of cool helmets, a lot of cool customizations that you can do, so go check them out. We're gonna jump right into it though right now. As most of you know, the Dolphins fired Wes Welker from his wide receivers coach position and Danny Crossman from his special teams coordinator position. So we have finally filled those holes on our coaching staff, and I'm here to tell you what they are. First and foremost, I'm going to go ahead and give you the good news. We hired Robert Prince as our wide receivers coach. He was just the wide receivers coach for the Cowboys, and I think he did a fairly good job. He actually won the 2024 Wide Receiver Coach of the Year award from the NFL, and he actually was with the Lions for most of the 2010s when they had really good receivers throughout the 2010s with Calvin Johnson, Kenny Galladay, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and he obviously left when Dan Campbell got there, and he cleaned house through and through. But he was actually there with Darrell Bevell, our QB coach. Hopefully we can keep Darrell Bevell as our QB coach. Still unknown if he leaves or not as of this moment. But that being said, he has that connection. He was the assistant head coach to Darrell Bevell when Darrell Bevell took over as the interim head coach position after Matt Patricia was fired. So there is that good connection there, and probably helped him get this job. Now, I don't necessarily want to say Wes Welker did a bad job as our interim or as our wide receivers coach, but obviously something wasn't clicking there and it wasn't good enough. And I do love that so far in his tenure, Mike McDaniel has not been afraid to make those changes that need to be made, or that he feels need to be made. Like, he's fired 3 coordinators and 3 coaches since his tenure, and he's going into his 4th year. Like, that is amazing. Like, you don't really hear that unless you feel like someone's trying to keep themselves out of the spotlight. Like, no, like he's like, okay, you're not doing good enough, you're cut. That being said, I'm not a huge fan of who he hired to replace Danny Crossman, who was terrible throughout his 6 years here in Miami. He hired Craig Ackerman. I might be saying that wrong. I think I'm saying it right. But that being said, I'm not a huge fan of this hire. He has never really had a terrible special teams unit. But he never really had anything that was above average either. From what I saw per PFF and per someone else, it was like a well-regarded special teams evaluator. He ranked them from as high as 18 to as low as 26. So like I said, never really terrible like we have been, but never really good either. And a lot of you might be asking, because the news came out earlier today, that the Dolphins never even reached out to Darren Rizzi. I'm going to tell you the straight reason why. The Dolphins passed up on him not once but twice for a head coaching position after interviewing him while being on this coaching staff. He was interviewed after 2012 when we fired Joe Philbin and had Dan Campbell as interim head coach. So not only did we pass him up on interim head coach, but then we passed him up on head coach. But he stayed on the staff for Adam Gase's tenure, and then we interviewed him once again after we fired Adam Gase. Then, of course, we went with Brian Flores, and that connection was it was severed. Brian Flores brought in his entire new coaching staff. Not many coaches were retained from Adam Gase's tenure. And that being said, when you're just sitting there and you're not hired or not even really given a fair shot at a head coaching position, you're kind of just sitting there whatever, not given the respect that maybe you think you deserve. I don't blame him at all. So they didn't even bother calling him for this special teams position. But the reason I do not like this hire in Craig Ackerman, besides being the fact that I wanted Darren Rizzi, is because this guy, once again, I just read to you what he had evaluation-wise. Never really a good unit, never really a terrible unit. but not necessarily decent either. He was fired in 2023 from the Titans coaching staff following a disastrous week. On December 4th, 2023, Ackerman was fired following a disastrous 31-28 Week 13 overtime loss to the Colts. The game featured 2 consecutive Titans punts being blocked, one of which, the first of which was returned for a touchdown, while the second resulted in a season-ending injury for their punter Ryan Stonehouse, and then a critical missed extra point attempt. That probably was the reason that they sent it to overtime rather than, winning the game. So after a terrible showing like that, I don't think he was on a staff last year, but he was fired. So I quickly, and I've had a day to really go over this in my feelings, and immediately I'm just like, why did we hire this guy? Like, what is the point? This guy has been terrible. Like, if for special teams, I feel like it's really just keeping your guys disciplined and not letting anything really hurt you. And to have a, below average special teams unit for all those years just feels like it's just a bad feeling, right? But then I kind of okay, I have to give Mike McDaniel the benefit of the doubt. I have to give it to him because look, Butch Berry, I hated that hire. I thought that was a disastrous hire because that man has never had a successful offensive line in his career. But now I get to see it up close and personal. And a lot of you guys are going to be like, well, our offensive line sucks. I get that. It does. It is terrible, but it is not coaching. I'm telling you, it is. This offensive line with anybody else coaching it, I wouldn't say really anybody else, but probably 80% of the other offensive line coaches in the league, if they were coaching this offensive line, it would be 10 times worse than what it is. 10 times worse. You guys don't understand how raw Patrick Paul was when he first came to the Dolphins, and you saw a little bit of that in the first preseason game, but the jump from his first preseason game to his second preseason game was tremendous. From his second to his third was crazy. It's like, oh, this dude has that raw talent. But then it's like, okay, that's preseason. It is what it is. I need to see him do that in an actual game. Not only did he come in and do that in an actual game and play extremely well, he not only did that on the left side where he practiced almost the entire offseason. He did it on the right side as well when he replaced Austin Jackson because Kendall Lamb was replacing Teron Armstead, or when he was being the third string right tackle. But regardless, that goes to show you how good Butch Berry has been. Aaron Brewer, I hated that signing because the man was a bottom tier center as far as passing goes. I think he was top 5 or 6 in run blocking, but in pass blocking and pass protection, he was ranked in the 20s and in the mid 20s at that. And this year, he didn't let up a sack until damn near the last game of the season. Butch Berry did that. Rob Jones, he's not a starter. He's a decent backup. Liam Eichenberg, he's not a starter. He's a backup. I'm not even going to say decent because the man got his ass handed to him on multiple occasions. But you see the correlation there. Austin Jackson, before he got here, Austin Jackson was okay. Now Austin Jackson is really good, and you really see the difference from when he's not in there. So I got to give Butch Berry a lot of credit, and I got to give Mike McDaniel and his evaluation of his coaches a lot of credit. Because once again, he has not been afraid to make those changes. In his first year here, our offensive line I thought was pretty decent. Obviously, he didn't see anything that he saw something he didn't like. He fired our then offensive line coach, brought in Butch Berry. He fired Josh Boyer. He fired Danny Crossman. He fired Vic Fangio. And I understand Vic Fangio's in with the Eagles now, but let's be real. If you're not having that connection with the players that you need to have, that coalition with your with your other coaches, is not going to work out. He went back to the city that he likes. He's from Philly or that area up there. He's doing okay. And even then, I was watching the Washington game, and I'm sitting there like, this is like watching the Dolphins last year. We're giving up so many yards, but not giving up a lot of points. It is like literally like the bend don't break narrative was going crazy. And they did exactly what the Dolphins did last year. That like they got some turnovers and they got pressure on the quarterback. But I don't think that defense is sustainable for them to be able to win the championship. I think it's going to be the Chiefs again. Could be the refs. Who knows? That being said, Mike McDaniel, I have to have my faith in him because this coaching staff and him specifically have done wonders with this personnel group that we've had. So it hasn't been a good personnel group this year. Probably won't be a good personnel group next year. But, great coaching. I mean, look at back in 2019, the tank year. That was the greatest coaching job I've ever seen out of Brian Flores, his defense, and then that offense with our then coordinator, who's escaping the tip of my tongue. Ew, pause. But he's escaping me, just his name. It's on. But yeah, anyways, that offense, I mean, they won 5 games. That roster was not good enough to win 5 games. It just wasn't. Plain and simple. So, yeah, you're going to see a great coaching job with some bad personnel, and that's what is going to happen. Like, yeah, we have some star players. We have Tyreek, we have Tua, we have Waddle, we have Achane, we have Ramsey, we have Teron Armstead for now if he retires or doesn't retire. But, I mean, who knows what happens there? And honestly, we just need to have the faith in Mike McDaniel because that's who we just need to have faith in. Because if you don't have that faith, then you're just going to be miserable this season. And quite honestly, I wouldn't blame you. All right, y'all. That's all I got for y'all today. Deuces.